Nashville has been cracked into multiple districts. Memphis has been cracked in multiple districts. And so there's no way that those people who live in those jurisdictions can vote for their representatives because the Republicans have purposefully gerrymandered those states to dilute their voting power.
So you're against diluting voting power?
I'm against gerrymandering.
Okay, so do you support then illegal immigrants being allowed to vote in elections?
Illegal immigrants don't vote in federal elections.
Well, illegal immigrants are who Democrats want to vote in federal elections.
But that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter if they want. It doesn't matter what anybody wants.
If you are against diluting political power for anybody, you should not want illegal immigrants to vote in American elections because we can't dilute the political power of Americans.
This isn't a discussion about that. And illegal immigrants are not allowed to vote in federal elections.
Here we have Brian Tyler Cohen and Caroline Sunshine going head-to-head on gerrymandering, voting rights, and whether either party actually believes what they're selling. And I want to share my honest read on what happens here. Underneath all the back and forth, this debate is really about whether the rules only matter when your side is winning. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know where you stand on this topic. All right, let's get into it.
If you are a Democrat in New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Illinois, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, this is the time to start fighting back and recognize the urgency of this moment right here. Because Republicans don't believe that Democrats have a right to exist as a party. And so if we don't start fighting back and if we don't stop unilaterally disarming, we're basically going to good government ourselves into obscurity.
Caroline, what do you think of this? Is it Jim Crow 2.0?
Well, so you're opposed to this because you think that this dilutes people's political power unfairly? Is that why you're opposed to this?
I think that it dilutes the ability of people in certain jurisdictions to be able to vote for their representatives. Nashville has been cracked into multiple districts. Memphis has been cracked in multiple districts. And so there's no way that those people who live in those jurisdictions can vote for their representatives because the Republicans have purposefully gerrymandered those states to dilute their voting power.
So you're against diluting voting power?
I'm against gerrymandering.
Okay, so do you support then illegal immigrants being allowed to vote in elections?
Illegal immigrants don't vote in federal elections.
Well, illegal immigrants are who Democrats want to vote in federal elections.
But that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter if they want. It doesn't matter what anybody wants.
If you are against diluting political power for anybody, you should not want illegal immigrants to vote in American elections because we can't dilute the political power of Americans.
This isn't a discussion about that. And illegal immigrants are not allowed to vote in federal elections. What about this move of what the Supreme Court did and what Republicans are doing right now when it comes to redistricting? A lot of this started with President Trump telling Texas to get him more congressional districts.
Well, I think checks and balances played out here. I mean, the Virginia Supreme Court said this can't happen in 2026, but it could happen in 2028. So I'm not sure what the big deal is here. This went through the democratic process, and the Supreme Court, the judge struck it down, saying the language in the referendum was flagrantly misleading. And he's not saying it can't happen. He's just saying it can't happen in 2026 because it's unconstitutional. And he's correct, because that is a flagrant power play by Democrats to try to reshape the midterms in 2026.
So if you think that's a power play, was it a power play when Donald Trump demanded the same thing in Texas, said that he was entitled to 5 seats in Texas? Was that a power play?
Texas isn't Virginia. The states are sovereign according to the Constitution. The 10th Amendment says federalism. Each state has the right to conduct it differently.
I'm asking you if it was a power play.
How it played out in Texas, because Texas isn't Virginia.
I understand that Texas is not Virginia, but I want to know if you think if it was a power play.
Where does this go? Because you want to talk about power plays. I would love to know. Hassan Piker on your side of the aisle said today that as a result of this ruling, if a peaceful revolution is not possible, then violent revolution is inevitable. So do you agree with Hassan Piker?
I'm not Hassan Piker. Hassan Piker can.
But do you agree with that?
Hassan Piker can speak for himself.
What does he mean by that?
I don't know. You can ask him. I'm not Hassan Piker. I'm Brian.
But do you agree with that? Do you condemn that?
Call Hassan Piker and ask.
Where do you want to see this go?
What I'm here. I don't care what Hassan Piker says. I'm not Hassan Piker.
Okay, so right out of the gate, Brian Tyler Cohen lays out the actual problem. Nashville cracked. Memphis cracked. People in those jurisdictions literally cannot vote for their own representatives because Republicans drew the maps to make it that way. That's not spin. That's documented. That's the thing he's arguing against. And here's where Caroline Sunshine does something that is a classic move, and I want you to catch it because they do this all the time. The second Brian gets her to say she's against diluting voting power, the second she commits to that principle on camera, she pivots. She doesn't stay on gerrymandering. She jumps straight to illegal immigrants voting. Out of nowhere. That's the move. That is a deliberate redirect away from a question she cannot answer without indicting her own party. Here's the thing. Illegal immigrants cannot vote in federal elections. That is not a debate. It is a federal crime. Brian says it twice. She keeps pushing it anyway. And you have to ask yourself why. Why drag an argument into the conversation that has nothing to do with redistricting maps in Tennessee and Virginia, if not to change the subject entirely? She walked right into her own argument. She told us she's against diluting voting power. Then she tried to make a case about a group of people who have 0 votes to dilute. Those two things cannot live in the same sentence, but she tried anyway. And then when Brian presses her on Trump demanding 5 extra congressional seats in Texas, she dodges again. Texas isn't Virginia. The states are sovereign. That's the answer. Not yes or no on whether it was a power play, just a civics lesson that conveniently avoids the question. This sets up everything that comes next, because Brian hasn't let go, and she's about to have to pick a lane.
Brian's pushing for a violent revolution.
Yeah,
either.
Are you or no? Just to be clear, because where does this go now that the Supreme Court in Virginia has ruled
Here's
this
where
is
it goes.
not
It goes to me calling on every Democratic elected official, either in the legislature or the governor's office, in Democratic states across the country, and demanding that they redraw maps to fight fire with fire and actually counteract what Republicans have done in a raft of different states across the country and what they continue to do in southern states across the country in response to the Voting Rights Act being gutted.
Do you think that there should be a national ban on gerrymandering to try to stop this whole thing around the country?
Not opposed to it, but I also believe that the Constitution says, the 10th Amendment, what is not outlined here is left to the states. And I think states have a right to decide their own process. And that's what I'm arguing with you is the process played out here in Virginia. It was put on the ballot on a referendum directly with the voters. It barely passed. The language was extremely misleading. There was an appeal. It then went to the state Supreme Court. What's the problem here? Checks and balances played out.
And you support a national ban.
100%. And in fact, when the Democrats put that forward, a national ban on gerrymandering in 2021, the Freedom to Vote Act, every single Democrat voted for it. Every single Republican voted against it.
Do you think the United States Supreme Court, which has supported Texas's right to do this and has supported California's right to do this, will support Virginia's right to do redistricting? You think they might overturn this?
No. I think that this Supreme Court has proven itself to be an arm of the Republican Party, if nothing else. And we have seen numerous instances where, whether it's this U.S. Supreme Court, where you had a bunch of justices beat their chest about the importance of precedent and the Voting Rights Act, which is, that precedent has been reaffirmed over and over and over again for the past 60 years, just like Roe was precedent that was reaffirmed over and over again. The Supreme Court stands for its own adherence to the Republican Party.
You think the Supreme Court might step in?
I don't think they're going to hear this. I don't see why they would. Again, the people of Virginia spoke. And what's interesting is when this referendum was put on the ballot, let's be very clear, it disenfranchised the rights and the voices, if we're talking about who got disenfranchised with a referendum, of rural Virginians. Yeah. This referendum transferred power from majority of the state, which is rural Virginians, and consolidated it among the swamp, which is people who work in D.C. and live in Virginia. But I didn't hear you speaking up then.
And I, by the way,
about
I would concede that when you have a gerrymandered map, certain people are disenfranchised, which is why this whole thing was sparked off after Republicans first went after Texas. I didn't agree with it when it happened in Texas, but what I don't want to see is unilateral disarmament. I think gerrymandering is a scourge all around. But if you really care about disenfranchisement, then you'll care about it when it happens right off the bat. You'll care about it when it happens in Texas. You'll care about it when all of a sudden Memphis is cracked into multiple districts, Nashville is cracked into multiple districts, and those people have no voting power because that's 100% Republican.
And that is true in California now, that Republicans are being disenfranchised by Prop 50.
But the difference
is the districts are not. It's not fair to Republican voters, and the idea of like a 52-0 map here is not fair. Just like it's not fair what we're seeing in Tennessee and other places where there's going to be no Democratic representation. That's bad for democracy.
Correct. It's terrible for democracy.
Right.
The difference is there's only one party that actually supports a nationwide ban on gerrymandering, and that's the Democrats.
Violent revolution, to be clear, is also bad for democracy.
And neither Brian nor myself are endorsing violent revolution, just to be clear. Always against political violence. I've said that repeatedly. Quickly.
This is where the whole thing blows open. Brian asks Caroline flat out, do you support a national ban on gerrymandering? And here's what she says. She says she's not opposed to it. She believes in states' rights, 10th Amendment federalism, but she's not opposed to a national ban on gerrymandering. Brian pulls the receipts. In 2021, Democrats put forward the Freedom to Vote Act, a national ban on gerrymandering. Every single Democrat voted for it. Every single Republican voted against it. Every single one. Let that sink in. The woman sitting on television defending Republican redistricting tactics just told you she's not opposed to a national ban on gerrymandering, and her entire party voted against the only national ban on gerrymandering that has ever been on the table. You cannot say that and then say this. Pick one. I'll give Brian that one. That was a good point, and Caroline had no real answer for it. What she tries to do is retreat back to process. Checks and balances played out. The Virginia referendum went to the voters, went to the Supreme Court. The judge struck it down. That's the system working. And look, that's not a crazy argument on its face, but here's the problem with it. The judge who struck it down said the referendum language was flagrantly misleading. That's not checks and balances working. That's voters being misled and a court catching it after the fact. And then, and this is important, Brian concedes something. He says he didn't agree with what happened in Texas either. He calls gerrymandering a scourge. He admits California's maps aren't fair to Republicans. That matters, because that is the move of someone who actually believes the principle and not just the outcome. Caroline never does that once. What comes next is the moment where you find out who actually cares about fair elections and who is just running a talking points relay race.
Here in Los Angeles, there's a very interesting race happening right now for mayor. Karen Bass, the incumbent, who has been embattled and does not have very high approval ratings right now, is being challenged by Spencer Pratt, a reality star known for The Hills, who's a Republican, gets a lot of attention on social media, had a debate this week, got a lot of attention for it. What do you make of what Spencer is doing right now? He's running ads that he's getting a lot of attention for. Certainly a lot of Republicans around the country who don't live in Los Angeles and can't vote for him are endorsing him. What do you think of his chances to actually win in a deeply blue city?
I think Spencer Pratt could be the next mayor of Los Angeles, and I'll tell you why. The last time a reality television star who was politically incorrect ran for office, he ended up all the way at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And Spencer Pratt is reminding me of the saying, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. He has all the makings. I don't even have to use the Donald Trump example. He has the charisma of Mamdani, AOC, Trump. He has that outsider, anti-establishment energy, and he is good at harnessing attention. He is running, tactically speaking, a very nimble, agile, smart campaign. I can tell that campaign is not being governed by committee. My guess is it's a very small team of 5 to 6 people who, just like Trump in 2016, are able to move a lot faster than bloated political consultant type campaigns. And Spencer, people are saying they don't like his politically correct, comments. So in the debate the other night, people said he was offensive maybe when he was suggesting that Nithya Raman go ask people who are homeless under the freeway for treatment. They were going to get stabbed in the neck, and people were really offended by that. Well, guess what? In Venice, California today, we had a man get his arm sliced off with a samurai sword. So Spencer Pratt, it looks like, is way more in touch with reality than the rest of the candidates on that stage.
Quickly, Brian, thoughts on Spencer?
What could possibly go wrong with a longtime reality star who speaks bluntly, knows how to game the media, and decides that he wants to be a politician? Look, I think that would
what
actually...
What do you have to lose, Brian?
I think that would actually carry more weight if Donald Trump's approval rating wasn't what it is right now, and if he wasn't, basically exposed as a con artist for promising to be this populist champion, and instead, prices are higher for everybody, healthcare's cut, food assistance has been cut, and we're spending God knows how many billions of dollars per day on a war in the Middle East that he promised would never happen.
Well, in the next few weeks, we will be talking to all the leading candidates for LA mayor, including Spencer Pratt, here on The Story Is. But for now, thanks to Caroline and Brian, we could keep going all night, but at some point we got to stop. Thank you, guys.
Let's talk about what this whole exchange actually proved, because buried in the back half of this debate, almost as a footnote, is the moment that exposes what this conversation was really about the whole time. The host shifts topics to the LA mayor's race, Spencer Pratt versus Karen Bass, and the guest, a Republican operative, makes the case that Spencer Pratt could be the next mayor of Los Angeles. Her reasoning? He's like Trump, politically incorrect, outsider energy, small team, moves fast, And then she points to a man who had his arm cut off with a samurai sword in Venice, California, as evidence that Spencer Pratt is more in touch with reality than the other candidates. Now, I'm not here to litigate the LA mayor's race, but I want you to notice what just happened in this debate. We went from a serious conversation about gerrymandering, about Nashville being cracked, Memphis being cracked, people losing the ability to vote for their own representatives, to a guy got his arm cut off with a samurai sword so the reality TV star is right. That is the full arc of this debate, and that's not an accident. That is the playbook. Here's the thing the whole exchange proved. Caroline Sunshine does not actually believe in the principle she was defending. She said she was against diluting voting power. She said she wasn't opposed to a national ban on gerrymandering. She invoked states' rights and federalism and the 10th Amendment, and every single time Brian brought those principles back around to apply them to something Republicans actually did, Texas, the Freedom to Vote Act, Trump demanding 5 seats, she either deflected or went silent. Brian said, and this is the quote that matters, "I would concede that when you have a gerrymandered map, certain people are disenfranchised." He said he didn't agree with what happened in Texas. He said a 52-0 map in California isn't fair to Republicans. He said gerrymandering is a scourge all around. That's someone arguing a principle. Caroline Sunshine never once applied her stated principles to something her party did. Not once. That's someone arguing a team. And that right there is the whole ball game. Because this is the thing that is actually making Americans lose their minds right now. Not just the left, not just the right, but actual regular people who are watching these debates and screaming at their televisions. Nobody believes in the rules anymore. They believe in the rules when it helps them, and they abandon the rules the second it costs them anything. Brian came with the actual numbers. The Freedom to Vote Act 2021, national ban on gerrymandering. Every Democrat for it, every Republican against it. That is not an opinion. That is a vote count. And yet the person sitting across from him wants credit for saying she's not opposed to a national ban, while her party blocked the only one that ever existed. You don't get to have both of those things. Zoom out for a second. Think about what this actually means for regular people. When districts are gerrymandered, and this is true whether Republicans do it in Tennessee or Democrats do it in California, you end up with politicians who never have to compete for votes from anyone outside their base. They only have to keep their most extreme supporters happy. That's why Congress can't pass anything. That's why every bill becomes a war. That's why nothing gets fixed. Politicians in safe districts aren't rewarded for solving problems. They're rewarded for performing outrage, and we're all living in the country that produces. Prices are higher, healthcare has been cut, food assistance has been cut. Brian said it at the end of the clip, and I don't think it landed the way it should have. Those aren't abstract policy positions. Those are real things happening to real people right now, and they're happening at least in part because a political system that has been engineered through decades of district manipulation produces representatives who have no incentive to actually govern. They have every incentive to fight. Fighting keeps them in office. Governing might cost them a primary. Now, who had the stronger argument? I'm not going to sit on the fence here. Brian won this debate on substance. He came with specific votes, specific legislation, specific districts. He acknowledged where his side has been wrong. He stayed on the principle even when the principle cost him points. Caroline spent most of the debate redirecting: illegal immigrants voting, violent revolution, Spencer Pratt. She never answered whether Trump's demand for 5 extra congressional seats in Texas was a power play. Not once. She just kept moving. But here's what I'll give Caroline. The process argument isn't nothing. Virginia's redistricting did go to voters. It did go to the courts, and a judge did review it. The argument that checks and balances played out has some legs, even if the judge found the referendum language was, quote, flagrantly misleading, which is not exactly a ringing endorsement of how it was handled. That's a real tension, and Brian didn't fully resolve it. But at the end of the day, you cannot spend an entire debate arguing that you care about diluted voting power and then refuse, flat out refuse, to say whether Trump demanding 5 extra congressional seats in Texas was a power play. That's the question she was asked. That's the question she walked away from. And that silence said more than anything else in the entire exchange. So, here's where I land, and here is the question I want you to actually think about. We know both parties gerrymander when they get the chance. We know that. Brian even admitted it. The Democrats had a bill to ban it nationally, Republicans killed it. So the real question is not, is gerrymandering bad? Everybody says it's bad. The question is this: if your party had the power to end gerrymandering for good and chose not to, does that mean they were never actually against it or just against losing? Answer that in the comments, because I genuinely want to know where you land.